This is a story about a hoodie, not the kind you buy for fashion, not the kind celebrities make cool, but the kind that holds memories and misunderstandings. The kind that makes people look twice and judge before they ask. This is a story about 43rd Street, a block like many others in Southside Chicago. Worn buildings, old bricks, new tension. It's the kind of place where neighbors nod, kids play ball until the streetlights flicker, and silence says more than words. But even silence has its limits. And this is a story about Luis, a 15-year-old boy who didn't ask to be noticed, who didn't want to be the center of anything, who just wanted to wear his father's hoodie, walk to school, and be left alone. But that hoodie, to some, it was a threat. To others, a symbol. To Luis, it was a piece of home in a world that kept trying to push him out. This is not a story about crime. It's not even a story about blame. It's a story about assumption, about how quickly a community can turn, and how one quiet kid found the strength to speak even when no one was listening. This is the hoodie on 43rd Street. Luis Martinez had mastered the art of disappearing, not vanishing, not like magic, more like becoming quiet enough to be overlooked. Still there, just invisible. He still breathed, still walked to school, still sat in the back of the class, hoodie pulled low, eyes fixed on his sketch pad. But on 43rd Street, where suspicion traveled faster than truth, Luis knew how to survive, by staying small. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't talk unless asked. He didn't laugh loud. He didn't slam doors or run down halls. And he always wore that same black hoodie, faded, frayed, slightly too big. The left cuff had a rip. The front pocket sagged. It smelled faintly of cologne and time. Most people assumed it was just some raggedy old thing he refused to toss. But to Luis, it was everything. It was his father's. Miguel Martinez had been gone for nearly 10 years. ICE took him, right out of their apartment, in the middle of a Sunday morning. Luis was 5, old enough to remember his mother screaming, too young to understand why the man who lifted him up like he weighed nothing never came back. The hoodie was the only thing they didn't take, left on the back of the couch like an afterthought. Luis wore it that night. He never stopped. It didn't make him feel brave, didn't make him feel safe, but it made him feel less seen. And in Southside Chicago, being unseen was a shield. At school, kids whispered he was weird. Teachers said he was distant. Even the few friends he had slowly slipped away. That was okay. Luis didn't need noise. He needed space. Space to draw, to listen, to stay small enough to be left alone. But on 43rd Street, even ghosts don't stay hidden forever. It was a Tuesday, rainy, cold, the kind of day the city feels like it's trying to fold into itself. Dinner was rice with peas. Luis wasn't hungry. Headphones on, pencil in hand, sketching a shadowy figure, half boy, half fog, melting into a brick wall. Rosa, his mom, talked about work, shift cuts at the diner, longer hours, lower tips. He nodded, but he wasn't really listening. The rain tapped on the window. The hallway lights flickered once, then again. At 9:42 p.m., glass shattered upstairs. At 9:44, a scream echoed down the stairwell. Luis flinched but didn't move. His sketch kept growing. By the next morning, the whispers were already loud. Someone broke into 3B, took jewelry, a tablet, maybe more. Saw someone run, tall, thin, hoodie, black hoodie. It's probably that kid. You know the one. They didn't have to say his name. Everyone already knew who they meant. Luis. The next day he sat in math class. Seat in the corner, hoodie up, head down. Then the intercom buzzed. Luis Martinez, please report to the front office. The room got quiet. A few snickers, a few raised eyebrows. Even the teacher didn't meet his eye. Luis grabbed his notebook, tugged the hoodie tighter, and walked out. In the office, two cops waited. One leaned on the counter, too relaxed. The other stood like a wall. Come with us, son. Luis blinked. Why? Just a few questions. Am I under arrest? Not unless you give us a reason. No cuffing, but the message was clear. Luis followed. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky still felt heavy. At 11:15 a.m., he sat in a gray-walled room. Metal table, one chair, one camera. His hoodie now listed in a report as a matching description of a suspect. They didn't let him call his mom, didn't offer a lawyer, didn't read him his rights. They asked, "Where were you at 9:45 last night? Do you know Mrs. Keating? Why do you always wear that hoodie? Why are you avoiding eye contact?" Luis answered, each word steady, measured. Home. No, it's my dad's. I just don't like being stared at. They leaned in, tried to rattle him, raised voices, long pauses. He didn't flinch. He'd trained his whole life for this. To not seem dangerous, to stay calm, to survive. At 3:10 p.m., they let him go. No charges, no apology, no escort home. Just a muttered, "We'll be in touch." Luis stepped into the wind, hoodie damp, shoelaces loose, no one waiting. He walked the 4 blocks home, eyes to the pavement, sketchbook pressed to his chest. The streets felt sharper, the shadows colder, and his hoodie felt heavier than it ever had before. Rosa nearly collapsed when he walked through the door. She'd called every precinct, gotten silence. She held him tight, then pulled back. My God, what did they do to you? Luis didn't answer. He walked past her, into his room, locked the door. That night the hallway was still, too still. Luis lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. He didn't draw, didn't listen to music, didn't cry, just silence. Then a sound, software, a whisper of paper against tile. He got up. There, beneath the front door, a note, folded, plain, no name. He opened it slowly. 5 words, scrawled in red marker. Stay out. We're watching you. Luis stood frozen, fingers clenched, stomach hollow. He looked down at his hoodie, then into the mirror, and for the first time, he didn't see a ghost, he saw a target. The hoodie wasn't just cloth anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. It was proof. It was suspicion. It was fear stitched into fabric. It was an excuse. Luis sat down on the floor, back against the wall, hood up, not to hide, not tonight, but to hold on, to what little of himself he still recognized. Because from this moment on, the world wasn't going to leave him alone, and he was done pretending he wasn't there. The hallway was no longer quiet. It whispered now, not in words, but in stares, in the way shoes shuffled when Luis walked by, in the doors that closed just a second too fast. Luis noticed everything. He always had. It was a survival skill. But now everything noticed him. It started with the group chat, the one called Neighbors of 43rd Street, created by the new tenants, the ones who moved in with golden retrievers and Amazon packages, who called the police over fireworks on the 4th of July. A screenshot from a school hallway video had made its way into the chat. Luis in handcuffs, hoodie up, eyes down, no context, no explanation, just a caption, "This is who we're living with." Dozens of replies followed. Looks exactly like the guy I saw that night. Knew he was trouble from day one. Why is he still allowed in the building? Call the building manager. Demand action. Luis never had a chance to explain. The internet had already convicted him. And in buildings like this, being presumed guilty was more than enough. That morning, Rosa found a notice taped to their door. Her hands trembled as she read, "Due to recent safety concerns, your lease is under review." No signature, no details, just fear in official language. Luis saw her try to stay calm, saw her bite her tongue, saw her quietly rip the notice down and throw it in the trash. But the way her hands shook, he knew. At school, it wasn't any better. His locker was spray painted, 3 red letters, RAT. No one looked him in the eye anymore. Even Malik, his only real friend, started sitting on the other side of the cafeteria. When Luis walked into class, the volume dropped. When he raised his hand, the teacher didn't see it. One day he overheard a girl whisper, "He's probably got a knife in that hoodie." That night, he threw away the pencil he'd been chewing on. It suddenly tasted like rust. He started drawing less. The shadows in his sketches became darker, the eyes more hollow, the mouth sealed shut. One of the pages simply showed a figure, curled in a corner with dozens of pointing hands reaching in from the borders. He didn't label it. He didn't need to. A week later, the police returned. They didn't knock. They waited outside the building. Luis was on his way home from school, backpack slung low, hoodie up as always. The officer who had interrogated him was leaning on a squad car. He smiled like they were old friends. "Still wearing that thing, huh?" Luis didn't answer. "We've got our eye on you, Martinez. Just so you know." They didn't take him in, didn't touch him, didn't accuse it. They didn't have to. They'd already planted the fear. That night, Luis had a dream. He was running down the hallway of the building, lights flickering, doors slamming shut as he passed. His hoodie grew heavier and heavier until he couldn't move. And behind him, the sound of boots, louder, faster. He woke up sweating, out of breath. He didn't tell Rosa. She was already carrying too much. Rosa tried to hold things together, kept going to work, kept cooking, kept pretending this was all temporary. But Luis could see the lines deepening around her eyes. He heard her voice on the phone at night, soft, tired, pleading. "He's a good boy. He didn't do anything. Please don't evict us." He hated that. He hated making her beg for space to breathe. The next blow came in the form of a meeting, building management, community safety review. They didn't invite Luis, didn't even tell Rosa. But the next morning, a new flyer was up in the lobby. A photo of Luis, hoodie and all, blurred just enough to claim deniability. The caption read, "If you see something, say something." Someone had scrawled in pen at the bottom, "We did. No one listened." Luis didn't say a word. He tore the flyer down, went home, closed the door, and for the first time since his father was taken, he cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, shaking sobs, face buried in the hoodie that had once made him feel safe. Now, it felt like a trap, a magnet for hate. He didn't eat dinner, didn't answer Rosa when she knocked. He sat on his floor, sketchpad untouched, and stared at the shadows on his wall. He wasn't afraid of monsters. He was afraid of being seen as one. The next day, someone spit at his feet on the sidewalk, didn't say a word, just a wet smack, then footsteps walking away. Louis didn't move, didn't flinch. His hoodie absorbed the hit, like always. Then came the final blow. A knock at the door. Late. Too late. Luis opened it. No one was there. Just a package. No name. No return address. Inside it, a knife. A toy knife, plastic, but painted red. Taped to a note that read, "You forgot your weapon, gangsta." Luis stared at it for a long time. Then he laughed. A hollow, broken sound. Then silence again. He stood at the window and looked out over the street. Same cracks, same broken lights, same people pretending not to watch him. And he thought, not for the first time, maybe if he left, they'd all be happy. Maybe if he disappeared again, they'd stop hunting him. But then another thought came, a quieter one, deeper. Why should I leave? I didn't do anything. Why am I the one who's scared? He looked down at his hoodie, touched the frayed cuff. For 10 years, it had been his shield. Now, maybe, it needed to be his banner. For the first time in weeks, Luis opened his sketch pad. On the first blank page, he drew a figure. Not hunched, not hiding, standing, back straight, hoodie up, head high, surrounded by shadows but not running. He wrote one sentence beneath it. They want a ghost. I'll give them a fire. At first it was just quiet, not peace, not calm, just silence, too thick to breathe through. Luis stopped talking in class, stopped trying to raise his hand, stopped sitting by the window where sunlight touched the floor. He didn't stop existing, he just stopped being visible. No one asked if he was okay. No one said hey in the hallway. Even the teachers looked through him. And honestly, that part was almost a relief, because when people did look at him, it was worse. They didn't see a boy. They saw a story, one already written for him. He's angry. He's unstable. He's probably in a gang. Watch him. Luis could feel their thoughts like static, always buzzing in the background, always crackling under their breath. He started skipping lunch. Too many eyes and too many whispers. He found an empty stairwell behind the gym, dusty, dim in soins. He'd sit there, headphones on, music off, just pretending to be anywhere else. One day Rosa tried to cheer him up. She made his favorite, tamales with cheese and jalapeno. She knocked on his door, smiling too hard. I added extra queso this time. Luis opened the door, took the plate, said nothing, closed it again. She stood there for a second, longer than usual, then walked away. He didn't eat that night. By the weekend, the building felt colder, even when the heat was on. Neighbors avoided him in the laundry room. Someone refused to share the elevator. A note appeared in the mailbox. Your son is making this place unsafe for everyone. Rosa didn't show him that one, but he saw it anyway. Crumpled in the trash, still legible. He started drawing again. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. There was nowhere else to put what he felt. The sketches changed. No more superheroes, no city skylines, no cartoons with big eyes and goofy grins. Now it was shadows, fences, hands pressed against glass, a boy falling through static. He didn't bother naming the drawings. They weren't for anyone but him. At school, the guidance counselor called him in. Mr. Patterson, bald, soft-spoken, always smelled like mint tea. How are things, Luis? Luis shrugged. You want to talk about anything? Luis shook his head. We're here for you, you know. Luis almost laughed. But he didn't. He just nodded once and left. On Monday, his art teacher returned a sketch assignment with a sticky note. See me after class. He waited, expecting praise or maybe a question. Instead, she said, "This is disturbing." She held up his drawing, a boy made of smoke, chained to a rooftop, the sky above filled with mouths but no eyes. "I'm required to report things like this. It might be a cry for help." Louis blinked. "It's just art. Art can still be dangerous." He walked away without answering. Another door shut. The final straw came on a Thursday. Rainy, windy, sky like lead. He was walking home, headphones in, hoodie up, when a man walking his dog crossed to the other side of the street. Nothing unusual. Happened all the time. But then the man turned around and shouted, "Take that hood off! You're scaring people!" Louis stopped. The man stared back. Tight grip on his leash, dog barking wildly. Louis didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at him. The man shook his head and kept walking, muttering something about thugs in this damn neighborhood. Louis stood there, soaked, heart pounding, hands clenched in his pockets. He thought about yelling, thought about throwing something. Instead, he just turned around and walked. Not home, nowhere in particular. He just walked. 3 blocks later, he sat on a bus stop bench, rain dripping off his sleeves, shoes soaked through. He watched cars pass, watched people inside them laugh. Warm, dry, free. He pulled his hoodie tighter, pressed his forehead to his knees and whispered, so low only the wind could hear, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything." By the time he got home, Rosa was pacing, tears in her eyes. "Where were you? I thought something happened." Louis looked at her and said the first full sentence he'd spoken in 2 days. "Something did happen. I'm just not bleeding, so no one cares." Then he went into his room, closed the door. Again. That night, Rosa sat outside his room for hours, humming, praying softly in Spanish, her hand pressed against the wood. Luis heard every word, but didn't open the door. He didn't want comfort. He wanted answers. He wanted someone, anyone, to say out loud what they all knew but wouldn't admit, that being a black or brown kid in a hoodie was all it took to be guilty. At 3 a.m., Luis got up, pulled out a sketch pad, and began a new page. A boy, made of bricks, standing in the center of a collapsing hallway. The walls were crumbling, people screaming on either side, but the boy didn't move. He just stared straight ahead. Expression blank, unmoving, unbreakable. At the bottom he wrote, "If I'm silent, they still hate me. If I speak, maybe I matter." He stared at the words. Let them sink in. Then slowly, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not because anything was better, not because he felt safe, but because something inside him had cracked open. Not broken, opened. And through that small opening, something fierce had begun to stir. Louis didn't need anyone to say it out loud. He already knew. They didn't just want him quiet. They didn't just want him invisible. They wanted him gone. It was in the way the hallway lights flickered when he passed, but never for anyone else. In how the laundry machines on his floor were always broken, but somehow worked fine for other people. In the glances that lasted a little too long, and the silence that followed him like a shadow. Then came the letter, delivered not by mail but hand-slipped under the door. No envelope, no stamp, just a folded sheet of printer paper with one line typed in bold. "You're making this place unsafe." No name, no signature, Just fear. Rosa held the letter in her hands for 10 minutes before she said anything. Then she folded it back up and placed it inside her Bible. Louis watched her do it, watched her pretend it didn't shake her to her core. 2 days later, they found red spray paint on their front door. Big block letters, dripping. Leave! Rosa called the landlord. No one picked up. She left a voicemail, calm, composed, asking for security camera footage. They never returned the call. The next morning, building management left a note in the lobby. The property has a right to protect its tenants and will be addressing any behavior that creates disruption, discomfort, or perceived threat to community wellness. Luis read it 3 times. Perceived threat. That's all he was now. A threat. That didn't even have to do anything. At school, word spread faster than he could walk. Kids pointed at their phones. Luis had been added to a group thread, gang watch, photos of him, his hoodie, screenshots of the hallway video. Captions like, "Why is this kid still walking around?" Dead eyes, classic profile. Watch your stuff when he's near. Louis tried to delete it from his mind, but the notifications kept buzzing in his pocket, even after he turned off his phone. Then came the stairwell. Louis was coming home late from school, delayed after waiting 30 minutes for a bus that never came. The building's front elevator was under maintenance, so he took the back stairs. The concrete was chipped, smelled of rust and wet cement. He was halfway up to the 3rd floor when he heard them. Footsteps behind him, fast, deliberate. Then a voice. "Yo, Hoodie boy!" Louis turned. 3 teenage guys, older, white, all wearing grins too wide to mean anything good. He recognized them. New tenants, sons of the people who hosted barbecues with wine instead of beer. "Heard you like creeping around at night," one of them said. "You smashing windows now? That's your thing?" Louis didn't respond, just turned to keep walking. But the second one blocked the step ahead. "Nah, stay a while, ghost boy." Louis tried to step sideways. The first one shoved him against the wall. "What's under the hoodie, huh? You got a weapon? Take it off. Let's see what you're hiding." Hands grabbed at the hood. Louis jerked back, heart thudding in his throat. Then came the push. Not hard enough to break anything, but enough to send a message. "We're watching you. You don't belong here." They walked away laughing. Louis stayed against the wall for a long time, breathing through clenched teeth, eyes burning. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, but something inside him cracked, not like glass, like firewood, the kindling of something sharp and hot. Back in his apartment, he slammed the door. Rosa ran out of the kitchen, startled. "Luis, ¿qué pasó?" He didn't answer, just stood in the living room, shaking. Rosa stepped forward, her voice softer now. "Did someone hurt you?" Luis nodded, just once. Then the words poured out. "They grabbed me, pushed me, told me I don't belong here. They want us gone. They won't stop until I disappear." Rosa's face crumbled, but she tried to stay strong. "We'll file a report." Luis laughed bitterly. "To who? The same cops who think I'm a thief? They don't care. No one cares. I'm just the kid in the hoodie. That's all they see." He stormed into his room and slammed the door shut behind him. That night he didn't sleep. He drew, feverishly, pages and pages of red and black. Buildings collapsing, figures chasing shadows. A boy made of smoke trying to hold himself together. At 4 a.m., Louis sat on the edge of his bed, hoodie still on, eyes bloodshot. He whispered to himself, I didn't do anything. Why do I feel like I did? The next morning, Rosa had a meeting with building management. They told her flatly, other tenants are uncomfortable. Your son is a disruption. Rosa fought, pleaded, brought up Luis's clean record, his grades, his silence. They shrugged. We'll need to discuss your lease renewal. A pause, then something colder. You might want to consider other housing options. She walked home with her head down. Louis was waiting on the stairs. He didn't ask what they said. He could see it on her face. Later that day, someone knocked on their door. Not hard, not loud. Louis opened it slowly, and there he was. A tall white man in a gray coat, kind eyes, worn shoes. A man who didn't belong here, but didn't seem to mind that he didn't. He extended a hand. Louis, my name's Elliot Crane. I think it's time somebody listened to your story. Louis didn't hear the knock at first. He was deep inside his sketch pad, drawing a boy with no face standing on a ledge, arms stretched out, wind threatening to take him. The knock came again, sharper this time. He flinched, dropped the pencil. Luis? Rosa's voice, tired, worried. There's someone here to talk to you. He opened the door slowly, not expecting anything, not expecting anyone. But there he was, a tall white man in a gray coat with worn-out shoes and a voice that didn't match the neighborhood. You must be Luis. I'm Elliot. Mind if I come in? Luis hesitated. Elliot didn't push, just waited. Something about the way he stood, not dominant, not casual, just present, made Luis step aside. They sat at the kitchen table. Rosa poured coffee, her hands shaking just slightly. Elliot introduced himself. Lawyer, community advocate, used to live in this building as a kid. I heard what's happening, he said, and I believe you're being treated unfairly. Louis stayed quiet. He wasn't ready to believe anyone believed him, but he listened. Elliot slid over a folder. Inside were screenshots, photos, notes. I've seen this before, Elliot said. They make someone into a problem until the rest of the building justifies pushing them out. It's not about crime, it's about control. Luis looked at the photos. One of them was of his door, spray painted with leave. Someone had posted it online, bragged about it. Got that thug shook now, the caption read. Luis felt heat behind his eyes, but he didn't let it fall. Elliot closed the folder. You don't have to say anything right now, but I want to help. Luis looked at him. Really looked. This man wasn't a savior, didn't pretend to be. He was just offering something Luis hadn't felt in weeks. A choice. After Elliot left, Rosa stood in the doorway. El parece amable, she said softly. But even kind people can't stop everything. Luis didn't respond. He went into his room, closed the door. Then he screamed, not loud, not long, but real. He grabbed his sketch pad, tore pages out, one by one, then crumpled them, threw them across the room. He kicked the wall, punched the closet door. His fist stung. His foot throbbed. He didn't care. He sat on the floor, back pressed against the cold wall, heart pounding. And for the first time since the whole nightmare began, he said it out loud. Why me? Why do they hate me? What did I do except exist? The questions echoed, bounced around the room. No answer came. Rosa knocked. Luis, can I come in? He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. She opened the door slowly, saw the mess, saw her son, sweat on his brow, hands trembling. She didn't scold. She sat down next to him, didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, "Your father, he was quiet too. People mistook that for weakness." Luis looked at her. "And it cost him everything." Rosa nodded. "But he never stopped loving who he was. That hoodie you wear, it isn't what they think it is. It's the one thing they can't take from you unless you let them." Luis swallowed hard. His voice came out cracked. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." Rosa put her hand on his shoulder. "Then don't." The next morning he woke up sore, exhausted, but also clear. He put on the hoodie, tied the strings tight, zipped it halfway, looked at himself in the mirror. He didn't see a ghost. He didn't see a target. He saw someone unfinished, someone who hadn't given up yet. At school, the whispers were still there, still loud, still cruel, but Luis didn't keep his head down. He looked straight ahead, didn't smile, didn't snarl, just walked. And for once, people moved out of his way. That afternoon, he sat with Elliot again. This time, they talked about the interrogation, the hallway attack, the threats, the silence. Elliot took notes, listened, nodded. "I can file a formal complaint," he said, "but it's more powerful if it comes from you." Luis hesitated. "I don't know how to talk like that." Elliot smiled. "You already are." They met again the next day, and the next. Rosa watched from the kitchen, watched her son sit taller, speak more, watched him come back from wherever they'd pushed him. She didn't say anything, but inside she was holding her breath, for the first time in weeks. Not in fear, but in hope. A week later, Elliot brought Luis to a youth center, a small space above a bakery, graffiti murals on the wall, couches older than Luis, but energy, life, kids like him, stories like his. There was a group that met on Tuesdays. Silent no more. Teens who'd been arrested, harassed, profiled. Each week one of them shared. Luis sat through 2 sessions, quiet. Then on the third, he raised his hand. He told them about the hallway, the stairwell, the note, the knife, about not being able to sleep, about hearing his mother cry through the wall, about feeling like he had to apologize for existing, about wanting to scream so loud that the world finally saw he was human. When he finished, no one clapped. No one interrupted. They just nodded one by one. And that meant more than applause ever could. On the way home, Elliot asked, "How do you feel?" Luis looked out the window. "Lighter," he said. "Not fixed, just less heavy." Elliot nodded. "That's a start." That night, Luis picked up his sketch pad again. He didn't draw monsters. He didn't draw himself falling. He drew a stage, a microphone, a hoodie, and in the crowd, 100 silhouettes listening. At the bottom, he wrote, "I don't need to scream to be heard." He closed the book, exhaled. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in weeks, Luis believed he might actually win. Luis didn't wake up different. There was no dramatic music, no magic moment, just a quiet decision, like switching on a light in a dark room. He was done being afraid. The air in the apartment was still heavy. The hate hadn't disappeared. The threats hadn't stopped. But something inside him had shifted, and now he was ready to move. Elliot met him at the youth center the next afternoon. "There's a local reporter," Elliot said. She's been following housing disputes around here. I think she'd be interested in your story." Luis raised an eyebrow. "You want me on the news?" Elliot shook his head. "I want your truth on the news. You decide how." Luis took a breath. "Okay, let's do it." They started small. Luis and Elliot wrote out everything that had happened, step by step, fact by fact. They laid it all down. The interrogation, the spray paint, the threat letter, the hallway assault, the note with the toy knife. It was hard. Each memory was a wound, but writing it made the pain less abstract, more real, more manageable. Elliot helped him file a formal complaint to the city. They attached photos, screenshots of messages from the neighborhood app, testimonies from the youth group, and they sent a copy to the press. A week later, Luis was sitting across from a reporter. She was kind, sharp, asked questions gently but directly. "Why do you think they targeted you?" Luis stared at the recorder on the table, then at Elliot, then at his own hands, still clenched. "Because I wore something that scared them. Because I didn't smile enough. Because I look like someone they don't want their kids to become. But mostly because they could." There was silence. The reporter didn't write. She just nodded. That night, she published the story. "The Boy in the Hoodie, One Teen's Stand Against Fear." It went viral, not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. Shares, comments, messages. People who had never met Luis now knew his name. Some called him brave. Some called him dangerous. Some said he was playing the victim. Luis ignored those. He focused on the ones that said, "This happened to me too. Thank you for speaking. You're not alone." School was complicated. Some teachers started treating him with sudden, performative warmth. Others stayed cold. A few students gave him quiet nods in the hallway. Others rolled their eyes, but no one pushed him anymore. And no one touched the hoodie. Then came the invite. A city council member wanted to hold a town hall on community police relations. They wanted authentic voices. They wanted him. Luis nearly said no. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't a leader. He was just a kid who drew things and tried to be invisible. But Elliot looked him in the eye. "This is your moment. You've earned it. You know what it feels like. That's what makes you powerful." Luis took a deep breath and said, "I'll do it." The night before the event, he couldn't sleep. He paced, wrote and rewrote his notes, practiced in front of the mirror, deleted half of it, started over. Rosa came in around midnight. She sat on the edge of his bed, looked at the crumpled papers. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "Just be real." Luis looked at her. "What if I mess it up?" She smiled. "Then you try again." City officials, reporters, residents, kids, people in suits, people in hoodies. Luis sat near the back, hoodie up, heart pounding. Then they called his name. Luis Martinez. He stood, walked slowly. The room got quiet. He stepped up to the mic, adjusted it, swallowed hard, then spoke. "My name is Luis Martinez. I'm 15 years old. I've lived in that same building on 43rd Street since I was a baby. I've never stolen anything. I've never hurt anyone. But I've been treated like I'm dangerous. Why? Because I wear a hoodie? Because I don't talk much? Because I don't look like someone they trust?" I used to try to shrink myself, be invisible. I thought if I stayed quiet, they'd leave me alone. They didn't. They came for me anyway. So now I speak. Not because I want attention, but because silence didn't save me. And maybe, if I speak, the next kid in a hoodie won't be a suspect before he says a word. There was a pause, then applause. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Luis stepped down. His knees trembled, but his hands were steady. Elliot met him at the bottom of the stage. "Proud of you," he said. Luis nodded, didn't smile, but something in his chest felt settled. Over the next few weeks, things changed, slowly but undeniably. The building management backed off. Rosa received a formal apology and lease renewal. The police department opened an internal review on how they'd handled the interrogation. Luis got invited to speak at a school board meeting. He said yes. He even got a message from the kid who used to sit next to him in homeroom. "Hey man, I didn't know what to say before, but you did good, for real." Luis didn't know how to respond, so he just said, "Thanks." And that was enough. He still wore the hoodie every day, not out of defiance, not out of habit, but because it belonged to him, to his father, to his story, and no one, no building, no badge, no stereotype was going to take that away again. One afternoon, he stood outside the youth center, sketchbook in hand. A new mural has been painted across the wall. A boy in a hoodie, standing tall, eyes open, microphone in hand. Luis didn't sign it. He didn't have to. Everyone knew who it was. That night, he sat on the roof of the apartment building, wind brushing his face, city lights blinking in the distance. Rosa joined him. They didn't talk much, but as they sat side by side, Luis said one thing: "I'm not scared anymore." She didn't cry, but she gripped his hand. "Neither am I." The flyer went up on every floor. White paper, bold black font. Community Safety Forum, this Friday, 6 p.m. All residents encouraged to attend. But that wasn't the real message. The real message was between the lines, between the laminated smiles and vague promises. This was damage control. The management company wanted the noise to die down. They wanted to look like they cared. They wanted the cameras gone. What they didn't want was Luis to show up. He stared at the flyer for a long time, then walked away. That night, Rosa asked him gently, "Are you going?" Luis shrugged. "Why? So they can stare at me in person." She didn't push, just said, "Maybe this time they'll have to listen." The week moved slowly. Rumors buzzed in the hallways. The city council's sending someone. That lawyer guy's bringing news crews. Luis Martinez is speaking again. Luis stayed quiet, focused. He didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to feel heard. On Friday at 5:50 p.m., he was still in his room, sketch pad on the desk, hoodie folded neatly on the bed. The building downstairs was already full. Neighbors crammed into the common room, coffee cups shaking slightly in their hands. Security stood by the doors. The property manager smiled too wide. Reporters adjusted their lenses. The air buzzed with polite tension. Rosa stood by the door. "It's starting soon?" Luis didn't look up. "I know." A beat of silence. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "You already did." Luis stood, reached for the hoodie. "I'm not going to prove anything," he said. "I'm going so they remember I exist." The room grew quiet when he walked in. Elliot gave him a small nod from across the crowd. One of the youth group members whispered, "He came." Luis sat near the back, hands in his pockets, heart punching in his chest. The first few speakers took the microphone. A council representative, the building manager, a community liaison. They spoke in safe words. Public safety, miscommunication, working together, moving forward. People clapped, lightly, out of politeness, not passion. No one mentioned his name. Then someone called out, "Let the boy speak." It was an older black woman, Unit 4C. Luis didn't even know her name. The crowd murmured. The liaison hesitated, then turned to Luis. "Would you like to?" Luis stood, walked to the front. No paper in hand, no notes. Just the hoodie, the silence, and the weight of everything that came before. He took the mic, looked at them. Neighbors, strangers, cameras. He let the silence sit, let them feel it. Then he spoke. "My name is Luis Martinez. I live here, have for 15 years. I've never stolen from you. I've never threatened you. I've never broken a single thing in this building. But for weeks, I was treated like I didn't belong. All because of how I look, how I walk, what I wear." He looked around. "This hoodie? It belonged to my father. He was deported when I was 5. I wear it because it reminds me of him. But to you it was a warning sign, something to fear, something to push out. I was followed, threatened, blamed. You say you want a safe building, but safe for who? Safe from me or safe from what you assume I am?" He paused. The room was dead quiet. No coughs, no whispers, just breath held. Luis took one last look at the room. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. You don't get to vote me out of existence." Then he handed the mic back and walked to his seat. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the woman from 4C stood. "I've been here since the 80s, she said, "and I remember when the real danger was being poor. That boy? He's the safest thing this building's got." Then another voice. A middle-aged man from 2B. "I saw the way they treated his mother. I should have said something. I didn't. I was wrong." Then a teenager stood. Then a young mother. Then a man who hadn't spoken in years. One by one, the people who had stayed silent, who had kept their heads down, stood up. Some shared stories. Some cried. Some just nodded. Their presence a quiet rebellion. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a protest. It was a reckoning. A wave of truth rising from the very floors that management wanted to silence. It was the kind of collective breath a community hadn't taken in years. And now that it had, there was no going back. The property manager tried to regain control. "We hear your concerns." But someone called out, "You heard them before? You just didn't listen." A ripple of agreement followed. No shouting, no fists, just the undeniable sound of people refusing to be erased. The cameras rolled. The council rep scribbled notes. And Luis? He just sat, still, present, real. After the meeting, people came up to him, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with stories. "My son went through the same thing. I was kicked out of my old building for asking questions. They called me a problem when I wore braids. A man shook his hand and simply said, 'You were brave tonight.' A woman hugged him. 'You spoke for more than just yourself.'" Luis nodded, listened, not because he had answers, but because he knew how much it mattered to finally feel heard. Later that night, he sat on the roof again, sketchbook on his lap, city noise humming below. He drew the crowd, the room, the faces. Then in the center, himself at the mic, hoodie on, head high. He titled it, Let Them Hear You. And this time, he signed his name. For the first time in months, Luis walked through the building's lobby without bracing for impact. No side eyes, no mumbled insults, no doors slamming shut, just footsteps, breathing, people. It didn't mean everything was fixed. Some still looked the other way. Some still clenched their keys a little tighter. But the fear no longer had weight. It floated now, powerless, because Luis wasn't shrinking anymore. The mural changed everything. The one in the youth center, the one Rosa had given him the blank canvas for, the one he painted with quiet hands, and the memory of everything they tried to erase. It wasn't grand, it wasn't pretty, but it was true, and it told a story with no edits, no softening, no shame. It was raw, like Luis. People came to see it, not just neighbors, but kids from other blocks, mothers pushing strollers. Even an off-duty cop who said nothing, just stood there for 10 minutes, eyes locked on the image of a boy in a hoodie, standing beneath a storm, but not sinking. Luis didn't like attention, still didn't, but he liked truth. And the truth was, the silence wasn't protecting anyone. Not him, not Rosa, not the next kid with a hoodie and a quiet voice. Elliot stopped by more often now, sometimes to talk strategy, sometimes to just drink coffee. They're listening, he told Luis. The city's considering a resolution on biased policing. Your voice helped push that forward. Luis didn't smile, but he said, good. That weekend, the youth center filled with new faces, kids who'd seen the mural online, who'd read the article, who didn't have a safe space to say, I'm scared too. Luis didn't ask for their stories. He just handed them a sketch pad, showed them where the supplies were, and sat beside them. That was enough. Sometimes presence is louder than speeches. One afternoon, a girl named Keisha drew herself as a shadow. When Luis asked what it meant, she whispered, sometimes I feel like I'm not even there. Luis nodded, then turned to a blank sheet and began sketching. Not for her, with her. They built something together. A new version of her. Still dark, still soft, but standing in the middle of the page. Visible. Rosa watched her son from the kitchen doorway that night. He was sitting at the table, correcting a younger boy's shading. She didn't interrupt, just took a photo. A quiet moment, a quiet victory. Later, she printed it and taped it to the fridge. Underneath it, she wrote in black marker, no more ghost. The phrase stuck with Luis. He scribbled it in the corner of notebooks, on napkins, on the back of his sketch pad. Not because he was trying to brand himself, but because he remembered how it felt to walk through a hallway and feel like vapor. Now every step he took left footprints. The youth center asked him to lead a weekend mural project, a real wall, outside, public. Luis hesitated. What if it gets painted over? The director shrugged. Then we paint again. So Luis said yes. And the kids showed up. Some brought paint. Others brought music. One brought her grandmother who told stories while they worked. They painted all day Saturday. Then again Sunday. The mural was messy, uneven, but beautiful. In the center, a row of figures in hoodies, not hiding, not shrinking, walking side by side towards something bright. Over their heads in looping black letters. No more ghost. By Monday, someone had posted a picture on social media. It went viral. Again. But this time, no backlash, no hate mail, just comment after comment. I needed this. I feel seen. This is healing. Louis still wore his hoodie, Of course he did, but now he wore it with his head up. Not as armor, as history. His father's scent had faded from the fabric, but not from his memory. Now it carried something else. His own strength, his story, his stand. At school, teachers finally started calling on him without flinching. A few even asked if he'd consider painting something in the art wing. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. Instead, he offered to start an after-school group. Not a club, not a campaign, just a space for kids who didn't want to raise their voices but didn't want to disappear either. They met every Wednesday, no agenda, just paper, pencils, quiet beats from an old speaker someone donated. One day, a boy who hadn't spoken all semester shared a poem. Another week, a girl turned her hoodie inside out and painted a phoenix on the fabric. Luis didn't run the room. He just opened it and kept it open. Elliot came by the group once, watched from the doorway, then nodded and said, "You did it." Luis didn't respond. But later he drew a sketch of Elliot, smiling awkwardly, coffee in hand, surrounded by kids with open mouths and bigger ideas. He gave it to him on his birthday. Months passed, spring arrived, then summer. And one evening, Luis stood outside the building. On 43rd Street, same cracked sidewalk, same bricks, but different eyes, different air. A neighbor waved. A kid on a bike gave him a fist bump. Someone drove by and honked twice. Not in warning, but recognition. Luis looked up at the building, then down at his hoodie. He smiled, just a little, then whispered, "You're not a ghost anymore." Some stories end with a bang. This one ends with a boy, still wearing the same black hoodie, but standing taller than he ever has before. Luis Martinez was never trying to be a hero. He wasn't chasing attention. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted space, to exist without fear, to walk home without accusation, to wear his father's memory without becoming a target. And for a while, that was too much to ask. But Luis learned something that many of us take too long to understand. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to fight with fists to change something broken. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay visible when the world tries to erase you. He spoke, he listened, he created, he healed, quietly, consistently, bravely. And in doing so, he reminded us all of a truth we often forget. The danger isn't in the hoodie, it's in the assumptions we attach to it. The real threat isn't the silence of the boy walking down the hallway. It's the fear that twists that silence into guilt. Today, Luis still walks those same streets, still wears that same hoodie, but now he's no longer walking alone. Behind him is a wave of kids who found their voices, of neighbors who finally chose to see, of a community brave enough to say, "We were wrong, and we want to do better." This is not just a story about injustice. It's a story about recognition, about what happens when someone who's been made invisible refuses to disappear. So the next time you see a kid in a hoodie, quiet, withdrawn, head down, ask yourself, am I looking at a threat or am I looking at a story I haven't heard yet? Because sometimes the loudest courage comes wrapped in cotton and silence. And sometimes what looks like just a hoodie is the very fabric of change. If this story moved you, if you saw a piece of yourself or someone you love in Luis's journey, don't let it stop here. Speak up when silence feels safer. Stand beside those the world tries to push aside. And listen, especially when the voices are soft and wrapped in hoodies. You can help build spaces where stories like Luis's aren't exceptions, but part of the truth we all hold together. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share this episode with someone who needs it. And if you can, support local youth programs, community arts centers, and organizations fighting housing injustice. Because real change doesn't happen from one voice alone. It takes all of us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for choosing to see what others overlook. We'll see you in the next story.